Of course, these guys will be running in a triangle this weekend, which is a little bit different to the other categories of boats.
Yeah, there certainly are. Formula racing tends to be endurance racing. So these races the final would normally be around a 20-minute race. So tactically, driver fatigue, fuel loads, all those sorts of things come into play. Now, we'll take a moment while we've got a little bit of quiet. Let's talk about the actual hulls themselves. A Formula powerboat is what we call an air-assisted hull, and if you're down on the bank as you watch these first boats come around the corner, the blue and yellow machine, let's pick that one up because that is Dave Mead's in Bud Light Racing. You'll notice underneath the boat there's nothing there. They are basically a mini catamaran. And as Bud Light, boat number 101, heads down the front straight for the first time, you'll notice how little of it is in the water, mate. It's as I said, we call this an air-assisted hull. The drivers themselves are referred to in the industry as pilots. These aren't a boat, essentially, they are a flying wing.
Floating.
Absolutely right.
They start to make their way down the main straight for the first time under load. And as Andrew was just alluding to, probably 6 to 8 inches of the rear of the hull only making contact with the water.
Now, there is a simple reason for that. Obviously, you've got a known amount of horsepower, you've chosen your propeller. The simple thing is contact with the water is friction. So the specific gravity of the water here, we can talk about that a little bit later on when it's a bit quieter. But the more of the boat in the water, the more friction on the hull. So the less of the boat touching the surface of the water, the less friction. Therefore, you're not wasting any horsepower or energy. So the idea being with a Formula powerboat, as you look underneath these boats as they come past, the gap between the sponsons or the two hulls on the outside, as it moves towards the back of the boat, it narrows. So the air that's forced underneath the boat starts to compress as it goes towards the back of the boat, towards where the motor's mounted. That creates vertical lift, so it physically lifts the boat up like an aeroplane wing and gets the boat up and dancing out of the water. Therefore, maximum boat speed.
And of course, that angle of attack, I suppose you would call it, it's called controlled by some paddles on the steering wheel. It can lift the motor and change the angle, which therefore changes the prop angle, and of course that will change the behaviour of the boat.
Spot on. So it's referred to as trim. So as I said, the drivers, depending on the drivers, some have foot buttons, but a lot of them have paddles on the actual steering wheel itself. And the reason it's so important, they actually run a 24-volt trim system. Some guys will run 12-volt up, 24 down. As you watch a boat come into a corner, turn one is actually, let's look at the double yellow cans out the back at turn number 2. The problem when you've got a boat up on its heels, so when the nose of the boat is trimmed high, you're forcing all that air underneath it, you're looking for maximum speed. When you turn the steering wheel, there's none of the boat in the water to get any purchase, so the boat doesn't want to turn at all. So you'll notice as these drivers head into these corners, they actually have to trim the nose of the boat down. You'll see the spray behind the boat change. You'll see the water move up the inside sponson, and that indicates that they've settled the boat down and so that they can round the corner. Now, the most phenomenal thing about one of these boats, it's not their top speed. They're capable of around 120 miles an hour in a straight line. It's how hard they can turn. A Formula powerboat can generate almost 5 Gs of force on a driver when they choose on a single buoy turn. So that's more than a Formula 1 race car. These boats have incredible turning power, and you're going to see that as this race unfolds.
So that beautiful boat number 14, the purple and white car boat, the iridescent purple really stands out. There's some really good presentation of boats out there as well, as you would expect for a Formula GP.
That's right, mate. This is the pointy end of the field. These guys take a lot of pride in their gear. The boats are made of carbon fibre. The driver sits in what we call a cell. So it's an incredibly strong carbon fibre monocoque cell that has a canopy lid that's latched from the inside. On board, the driver is in a 5-point harness. They're wearing a Hans device, a lot like you'd see in a Formula 1 car. The only difference being is that they have a full onboard air system. So the drivers will be wearing a mask connected to an air bottle. So should it all go wrong, should they over-trim these boats, mate, and they end up upside down, that they have the capacity to sit in the water for up to 10 minutes and comfortably evacuate the cockpit of these boats. So let's have a little bit of a look at our field as they roll around now. Let's pick up the yellow and blue machine in front of us right now. This is boat number 65, SFR blazing down the side. It is the Smith family racing, Matt Smith. As I mentioned, this boat is, the hull type is called a Baba, has a very aggressive nose on the boat, Vaughan. You'll see it in the back. They look almost like a falcon or some sort of bird of prey, this very, very interesting European style of machine. They very much love the rough water. They sit really high in the water column. As Smithy brings it in through up at the bridge end right now, glinting in the sun. They are a sister pair, these two boats. They're identical hulls. Just trims the nose of the boat and allows it to drift onto the front straight away. And that's one flying lap. If you have a look at the gearbox at the back of these boats, you can see the torpedo, just only half the propeller, just the tips of the blades contacting the surface when they're at full noise in these straights, these semi-surfacing race propellers.
And one of the things that I've picked up on since coming to powerboat racing is the leg on the motor is not a long traditional leg. It's a very, very short leg.
Absolutely right. And again, it's about the drag. You want to get less of the hull in the water, less of the leg in the water. The more contact with the water, the less boat speed that you have, essentially. So trying to get that boat up and running just on the blade tips with a cushion of air underneath you gives you maximum speed. Boat number 85, the white and black machine, comes past the commentary box. This is a young man by the name of Austin McDonald, supported here this weekend by Copper Coast Marine. He's all the way from Wallaroo in South Australia. This hull is a Molgard hull. It's a beautiful machine, built over in Europe. Austin's a very serious sprint car racer, mate. He's been racing sprint cars for a long, long time in Class 1 and decided to give it away, and he's got the powerboat bug, so this is his first full hit out in the series, is young Austin.
And his first round for the season was back in Albury, back in December, so a few months out of the boat.
We've had a couple of really good chats with him, mate, and he's obviously a racer. He's had a lot of success in sprint car stuff, but when you come to this playground, you are racing against some of the best in the world, and it's a tough learning curve, mate. So he's done a great job, and he's really using this as a season of learning. He started to really move forward in the pack, though. I've had a couple of laughs with him about, hey, when you're learning, normally you're sitting behind everybody, but you're starting to make gains. So they've done a great job. The presentation of the boat is immaculate, and really expect good things out of Austin McDonald this weekend.
He'll be worth keeping an eye on. That's boat number 85 of Austin McDonald. And I've just noticed I think it might have been Ewan Bricker, has just came into the pit area. So probably a change of prop, maybe put some more fuel. What is the fuel capacity on board these boats?
It does depend. They normally carry a maximum around 45 to 50 litres. However, these guys are only going to run a 7-minute race, so they're probably going to be running around 9 or 10 litres of fuel on board. The boat really does depend. I should have mentioned when I was talking about engine types, each engine category has a minimum hull weight, including driver. So you'll see over in pit lane, there's a set of scales. So as the boats come out of the water, they are lifted and weighed. The SST 120, which is the smallest engine in the field, they get a 50 kilo weight advantage. So because it's a smaller cubic capacity engine, they're allowed to run at 450 kilos, whereas the 2.5s, the Optimaxes and the Apex all run at 500 kilo hull weight. So it's a slight advantage for those smaller, lighter, faster boats. Boat number 2, the Stars and Stripes of TBR. What a beautiful machine, mate.
Yep, Ewan Bricker. And this season saw Ewan campaigning a different engine combination, being the 2.5. And Ewan is still up there on the series leaderboard, currently sitting in 3rd position. So that's another boat worth keeping an eye on, out of 18.
Mate, he's a young guy. He's probably one of the youngest in the field, actually. I think he's 24, in fact, from Langwarrin in Victoria. The boat is TBR, Team Bricker Racing. It's actually a DAC or a DAC hull built in Europe. And this is one of the factory DAC machines. It is a work of art, this thing. It's super fast. When Ewan first came to this series, he was the quickest kid on the water, but unfortunately he would end up upside down more times than see a checkered flag. Through perseverance and hard work, he has really taken that out of his game. And he wins races. He's often the fastest qualifier out there. And for such a young guy, he's really matured as a driver. As I said, he'd be at the front of the field and then he'd end up upside down doing a full 360-degree barrel roll with 2 laps to go. But, you know, drive into holes that weren't really there. He's had a lot of contact with other competitors. But credit to Ewan and his father, Gavin, who's down there on the cans with him this weekend. He has really come of age as a powerboat racer. Sitting in second now with Andrew Chilvers out of action. So I expect big things from the TBR race machine. Look at the way he's just dancing it on that little wind chop.
Yeah, boat looking very stable and very quick as it heads down into turn number 1. Into the sunlight here on the mighty Murray River at Yarrawonga. Now, harking back to my go-kart days, being a 2-stroke, they don't like to idle, do they? They like to be shut off before you start fouling plugs.
Absolutely right.
Same as these.
So exactly the same scenario. So this is old technology. And, you know, the fuel is a control fuel as well. You can't use specific race fuels. However, the oil ratio that you mix is up to you as an individual. So you want to be able to have enough oil that there's enough lubrication in the engine, but too much oil will reduce your horsepower. Most of these guys will arrive here at this race weekend with 2 or 3 power heads. So in case they nip a piston, in case they hurt an engine, they've got another engine to bolt back on and continue racing. So it's a bit of a big show, Vaughan.
So all of these motors, they're able to download the data, have a look, and then make a decision onto fuel, because our atmosphere changes throughout the day. Right now, they've probably got the best of the conditions, but later on, say at 2 o'clock this afternoon, it's going to be hotter. Water conditions are going to change, and they'll have to make a change to that engine maintenance as part of their maintenance schedule.
You're spot on, and that's an interesting thing that you say that. One of the things about a Mercury Optimax or the new Mercury Apex Racing, they're high-tech engines. So they have things like manifold pressure sensors, air pressure sensors, all that sort of stuff. So for example, here I think we're only around 25, 30 metres above sea level. So the Optimax will adjust itself and its fuel mapping for that. However, if you're running a carburetted engine, it won't. So as the temperature increases, you may find you need to rejet a carburetor. You need to lean the engine out, use less fuel, use more fuel. When we race at different locations, particularly down in Tasmania, or if you race in some of the lakes up in the high country, you tend to find that these mechanical engines, there's a whole lot more to think about as a team chief, as a crew chief, to try and get the revs that you're looking for.
And the atmospheric pressure plays a big part of that decision.
It certainly does, mate. Local if you know any helicopter pilots, ask them about local area atmospheric pressure, and they'll tell you all about it. Hey, an interesting thing about this track, obviously the beautiful Lake Mulwala, we talked about it in the early shots. This was a mill pond, Vaughan. It was a glass off. Have a look at the chop on the water right now. Now, this is not by wind, this is just boat traffic. It's an incredibly unique thing about the Lake Mulwala course. It is the only venue in Australia that we race that has this scenario. All the way in front of us here is a vertical concrete wall. This is a man-made lake. So what happens is those small washes, as the boats come past, they roll across to what would normally be a nice sloping bank at a lake edge and dissipate. Not so here. They hit that vertical wall and they start heading back. So if you actually watch the water conditions just for a second, we'll pick that up in our camera shot, you'll see the confusion in the waves. So little peaks everywhere. It's not coming from a specific direction. And as a driver, that is a very, very challenging thing, because you can have little waves stand up in front of you that you weren't expecting to be there. For a Formula Boat driver, this is fast water right now. Those little waves, they're breaking the surface tension, they are breaking the friction on the hull, and these boats are really putting on. We might grab a lap time next time round, I think, on one of our competitors, just to get a bit of a read on exactly where we're at for lap times for a little bit later on when we go into qualifying.
So number 2 of Ewan Bricker just going past again down into turn number 1. And he looks really quick out there at the moment. Of course, all of these guys on the radio back to their crew chief sitting back here on the shore. And they'll be, I guess, made aware of oncoming traffic or somebody coming up from behind. Start checking the mirrors.
That's exactly right. Now, remember, coming into a corner, these things will pull 5 Gs. You'll see as they hit a corner hard, they're 100% throttle. They don't back off for the corner at all. 100% throttle. Trim the boat down. Let the friction of the boat. What's Paul saying in turn number 1? Bang, on the trim. The spray builds, hooks the boat around the corner. So the actual boat is what blows the speed off. They'll tend to hold full throttle into a corner. It takes a lot of courage to do that. because 1 millisecond wrong and you've overshot the corner by 10 or 20 metres, and if there's a boat on your inside or your outside, you've either lost the race or you've just driven through the side of one of your competitors. All right, Joel Smith will just try and get a lap time on that one, Ryan. So about a 45-second lap in this early part of practice. Now, this is a short track, Vaughan, 45 seconds a boat, 18 boats out there. When we go racing, mate, it is going to be on all over the field.
Yeah, it certainly will, as the number one, and I guess number one would be the Australian champion as it stands right now.
It certainly is, mate. That is Mr. Reece Coles, the man behind Butler Vehicles is the name of the machine. This is the blue boat heading down to turn number 3. Mulwala water ski back straight as Reece Coles. He is the reigning champion last year. He was faultless. However, he had a massive upside-down moment, crashed the boat, broke half of the back of the boat out at the last round. I've never seen him make a mistake like that in the last 7 years, and it was genuinely an error. But have a look at Reece now. Experimenting with different ways and different lines around this track, trying to get a feel for it depending on your pole draw. But look at the way he dances this hull. It's a beautiful DAC. None of the boat in the water, Vaughan. That is on point right there. The Butler Vehicles into turn 1.
As you said, that is a factory boat, and yeah, probably one of the best pieces of kit out here. But there's so many quality boats here. It's just, I really can't pick a winner. I've been studying through the Formula GP entrance for the last 2 weeks, and it's really open.
It certainly is, and the lap times we saw, like we were separating qualifying last time around. I think in Albury it was actually it was Kai Cornell. We were getting into the hundreds when we were separating the top 5 boats. So we had 5 boats within, I think it was like 4/10 of a second. It's just incredible, the pace. You'll see that time round, Reece running a tight line on the pins in Butler Vehicles. Boat number 1, Stone Real Estate, on board with him this weekend. Reece Coles is an incredibly successful Australian powerboat racer, has raced all across the world, has won just about everything there is to win. One of his best mates and absolute arch nemesis he's up against here this weekend is Simon the Iceman Troy in the red and white mainline Dynalog machine. We'll see Simon out here in a very short space of time. These boats aren't very wide, Vaughan, mate. They're only about 7 foot wide, I suppose, maybe 7.5 feet wide. Reece has that incredible ability to make that boat about 47 feet wide when he doesn't want to get overtaken, and it's one of those tactical things. It's one thing to get up beside someone, but to try and get past them, it's a very, very different thing as he buttons off.
Yeah, I think he might have been on a flyer on that last lap. Unfortunately, we didn't get a lap time on him, but yeah, he's really backed the boat down now as he goes right out wide into turn number 1. So just letting the boat cool down, I would say. He'll probably head back into the pits, maybe a prop change. And as we said, they'll download that engine data and make some decisions on what we are going to do with the fuel systems on these boats. 18 boats for race number 1 coming up a little bit later on today, and that's just part of the action here at Yarrawonga this weekend, of course, for the EC Griffiths Cup. And that is just going to be a wide open event as well. We'll talk about all of our events as the day progresses. A lot of history here this weekend as well, Andrew.
Oh, it's huge. This is going to be one of the best weekends. If you're into boat racing or if you're just into events in general, this is going to be phenomenal. Well, we might take a second. The white and red machine out there on the water, I think he's wearing race number 15. This is the R. Marine Jackson's Lucas Tree Services machine, the GTR, so the Trask Development Racing boat, built here in Australia and campaigned internationally by Grant Trask. The driver or the pilot behind this boat is Sam Lucas. Mate, the smiling assassin. This bloke is one of the hardest drivers in the series. There is no question about it. Was invited to go overseas last year and compete on the world tour of the F2 category, which is this engine class, and went over there in borrowed gear and gave a great account of himself. There is no middle ground for Sam Lucas. He's raced in Thundercat. He's raced in open powerboat racing. He's raced in absolutely everything. And man, this guy has the courage of a lion. When the red mist comes down in that visor, he is one of the fastest guys you're ever going to see in the water. He's very hard on the gear, mate.
Well, I had a great talk to him yesterday afternoon while we were setting up here. And yeah, like you said, he's the smiling assassin to talk to. He's such a personable guy. But as you said, as soon as you put that orange helmet on, look out, he changes.
the team, obviously Stuart Jackson is a co-team principal of this boat. So you've got the Marine Jacksons, Lucas Tree Services, Marine Jacksons Racing, Marine, Epic Marine. There's, I think, 6 boats in the flotilla. They have been working overtime. A massive shout out to my good mate Stewie Jackson, who is not here with us this weekend, but he will be glued to the set. I said they had to buy this boat because they completely demolished the last one last time out, leading from the front of the field. And mate, it's looking very, very sharp right now for Sam Lucas in Marine, Lucas Tree Services. A huge shout out to his partner as well, the beautiful Emily Lucas. They've just had their first child, so I don't think Sam's up here this weekend, but boat number 15, the orange number board signifying the Mercury Optimax. He's hard into turn number 1, Vaughnie.
Like you said, he's just full throttle, turn the boat in, experience what 5Gs is like, trying to throw you out the side of the boat. And then the acceleration, it must be like getting shot out of a cannon.
It's an interesting thing with this course, obviously the big radius corners, so 3-buoy turns at number 1 and number 3 is not what this traditional course set would be for these guys. They would normally be turning on a single buoy, so they can make it a 90 degree or whatever it needs to be to get to the next turn buoy. As we'll just watch Lucas, so the white and red machine through turn number 1. He'll actually settle the boat down, so bang, trim it in, make a turn, lift it again in mid-corner, settle it. So you're almost having to adjust twice to get around this big arcing corner. If you're running a wider line like we saw Reece Coles do, actually Dave Meads has done it just then, instead of settling the boat, you just leave the boat in the air and slide the boat around on a wider line. It's going to be interesting to work out what the faster method is through these big arcing corners. Turn number 2 in the back straight, the double yellows that the orange boat is approaching right now, different. It's a single buoy turn. Settle the boat down, get it turned, get the nose of the boat up, lose as little power as you can. And you'll see that's a really good example as you watch Bud Light come in now. You'll see the spray on the left-hand side creep forward. So watch the grey machine now, trim down, spray goes to the front of the sponson, trim back up, get the nose of the boat in there, get that air back underneath it, reduce my friction. That's a really good example of how the trim works and how you get these boats around these corners.
And you're saying about the different radius on the corners, and that can also come down to your prop selection as well, whether you want to keep the revs up or do you want to tune the boat so that you can hug the pins all the way around.
Certainly is, and this course is going to be, as I said, it's not a traditional course. They would normally run more, let's call it a rectangle, but with a right-hand turn in the middle of it. So they would normally have 3 90-degree left-handers and then a right-hander to get around with sort of dog legs. So this elliptical triangle is going to be a really interesting one. So you will guarantee there's going to be prop changes after this practice session for qualifying. Right, news through from John Fowler. Vaughan, I think, time-wise?
Yep, 7 minutes remaining in this one for our Formula GP practice section out there on the beautiful Lake Mawala.
So undoubtedly Sam Lucas is fast. Now, to confuse us in the commentary box, boat number 24 right there, that is a silver boat. It's running a white canopy, as I said. This is the Epic Marine Jackson's entry of Stephen Gilligan of the Epic race team. He unfortunately at Lake Charm competing in the archery event, which is an event from his home club. He unfortunately completely 360-degree backflipped this boat in the straight in lap number 2, and the boat was significantly damaged. So a massive shout out to the Epic Marine team for getting that boat back on the water. I want to talk for a second about, look at this silver machine coming past the commentary box right now, boat number 91. This is Paul Sain. The boat is called Trim King. It's got the big smiling jaws on the cockpit at the front of it right now. Paul Sain out of Sydney in New South Wales. This hull is an Aussie F1 composite, so it's a boat that's built here in Australia. In fact, it's a sister boat to Kai Cornell, 117 Motorsport, the series championship. Paul Sain, an incredibly talented open boat racer, racing bullets and that kind of ski boat style thing. Came across about 3 years ago. He's a really tall man. He's about 6'4", so they've had to modify this boat a lot. They're calling this boat Trim King 3.0. They've done a massive amount of work to the underneath of this boat. They've been changing the shape of the hull to balance it to the way that Paul wants. And I tell you what, that boat is looking super fast here this weekend, Vaughnie.
Well, there's just another contender here for the Australian Formula GP Championship here. Of course, race 1 coming up later on today. And a huge field of boats, quality field of boats, and some of the best tunnel boat racing you'll find outside of Europe and America.
Yeah, without doubt. There's several of these drivers out here have campaigned on the international stage. A few not joining us here this weekend. Obviously, big shout out to Grant Trask and a couple of others that'll be glued to the TV set. But again, the rules around powerboat racing are relatively simple because we are simple people, let's be honest. There is no minimum side gap. So I can pull up to within 30 centimetres next to you if I choose so as we enter a corner. However, if I overtake you, before I can come across and take your racing line is a minimum of 3 boat lengths. Now, if you look at the pace and the speed and the ground these boats are covering, and you multiply 3 boat lengths in your mind, that is absolutely nothing. It puts you right in the rooster tail of the boat in front of you. So it's a very, very aggressive race format. One of the things about an air-assisted hull, you can have the boat trimmed to absolutely perfection and it's jamming air underneath it and you're looking $1 million. You decide it's time to move across to take an inside line into turn number 1 and have to drive through the spray of the boat in front of you. Obviously, you're now driving through air that's laden with spray. It's physically heavier, it's got more volume, there's more lift. It's often when you see a boat as it tries to come across the back of another boat to get an inside run, they grab too much air underneath them, bang upside down, a full 360-degree backflip up to around 60, 70 feet in the air, and all going well, land back on its wheels and continue on.
And all of that at 120 miles
an hour, mate. Yeah, it's a hell of a sport, this thing, the Formula GP. Boat 117, Kai Cornell Motorsport, Mr. Hollywood. This young gun, he's an unbelievable kid. He pedals the wheels off this thing. Big shout out to his family, to Lauren, his partner, and everyone supporting him here this weekend. This is the orange and white machine into the back straight. He is the series leader. He is the guy they all want to beat. He's got a massive target on the back of that 117 Motorsport machine this weekend. Talked to him earlier in pit lane, Vaughan. He wasn't feeling the pressure. He's just going to go out and do his thing.
Very relaxed earlier on this morning, and now I suppose, would he be like Sammy Lucas that changes once he gets into a boat? I think everybody does that, don't they? We're coming from motor racing background. As soon as you put the helmet on, the train of thought just goes out the window. Yep. And yeah, you're a completely different person inside that cockpit.
As I say, there's 2 types of tunnel boat races. There's guys that have been upside down and guys that are about to be upside down. It sounds crazy, but it's reality of it. This is to be at the front, to be competitive, you have to be 99.9% committed. Running on that ragged edge between losing everything and being fast. And it's a really brutal sport in that respect. Kai Cornell, he's had some major incidents in some river races, and it's a big shout out obviously to the inherent safety of the boats. As I said, these drivers are completely encapsulated in a carbon fibre cell with 6,000 or 7,000 Newton metres of resistance, a 5-point harness, Hans device, helmet, and of course a breathing system. So much like a Formula 1 car, mate, these guys what can look spectacular just gets expensive and everyone walks away and lives to fight another day.
The boat number 66 for Deegan Marine Racing. It looks like he's coming back into the pit area as well. As we said, these boats don't like to idle. So you want to be trying to get into that boat ramp area safely, but not have the engine continually idling.
Without doubt, one of the nicest gentlemen in this sport, Hadley Deegan, the pilot behind the Deegan Marine Racing machine, comes from a long line of powerboat races from Ulverston in Tasmania, and brought the big crew over, and incredibly competitive. Obviously has joined this series because he wasn't getting pushed at home by his fellow competitors. And to be part of a series when you can race against 19 boats is just phenomenal. It's you know, even in motor racing, 19 cars in a grid is a big field. And when you put the energy, the pressure, all of that together out here, this is the show everyone wants to be part of.
Yeah, for sure. Now, going back to our start, for our racers, they will line up in front of our commentary box and head directly out onto Lake Moala. What's the rule about turn 1? Is it first there gets priority, or do they have to stay in their lanes?
No, they do. So it is probably one of the only rules, and I guarantee you there'll be a drone sitting over there to ensure that it's managed. So the run to turn number 1, you must hold your pole. So you cannot, even if you get to the corner first, you cannot take lane 1 if you're in lane number 2. However, what then happens is the distance between boats is negligible. So you'll see them start here. They'll be about 1 to 2 metres apart. They'll dive. They'll hit their top speed around halfway across that straight. So they'll be doing 110, 115 miles an hour coming in to more than a 90-degree left-hander. They'll be 18 boats wide. So for the guy in pole number 4, if he's there first to judge how much room he has to leave for the 3 boats inside him, it often goes wrong right there and then. And all we will see is a ball of spray and hear the thump of carbon fibre compressing. And it's a horrible feeling because it means someone's weekend is already over in turn number 1. We have seen it. There's going to be a massive crowd here this weekend, so fingers crossed they can keep the horns in, Vaughan.
And yeah, as you were saying, that thump of carbon fibre, that's not the nicest sound to hear.
Not at all.
And a very expensive sound as well.
Tell you what, later on, if you get a chance, we might, and definitely this afternoon, the boys at Trim King, they have done a huge amount of work to this boat. The airbrushing on the deck, it is looking $1 million. Paul Sain has come of age as a driver. He really has. He's in qualifying. He's now, what has been a weakness. He's moved his way forward in the qualifying grids. That boat, I reckon he's going to frighten a few people here this weekend. The boys were quietly confident when I caught up with them this morning. So big field, checkered flag now shown by our AFPGP race controller, John Fowler. And it's a good time to give a shout out to all of our officials here with us at the Yarrawonga Spectacular this weekend. Power of work goes into this event, and to the VSBC, the Victorian Speedboat Club, for hosting this round.
Of course, we can't go motor racing and do what we love without the help and support of all of our volunteers, and such a range of tasks to do. If you're thinking about getting involved in powerboat racing, why don't you come and have a chat to the ladies and gentlemen at the Victorian Speedboat Club. I'm sure they'll be able to find you a job and get close to the action.
Now, I didn't pick up on that actually while we were in that series. I did note the caution flag was up, but I can see out there on VOC Rescue 1, the yellow boat, that Caleb Frost, the young man from Caleb Frost Racing, is actually out of his boat. So this is that brand new Mercury Racing Apex engine. So this brand new technology, 3.4 litre V6 engine. So he's actually looking for a tow back in. They've only literally, his father, Wes Frost Racing, very, very experienced here this weekend. This is the first time we've ever seen this engine in this series in Australia, anywhere outside of the US, to be perfectly frank.